everybody. Good evening. Welcome to our Mexican Crossing Lines. Please share this out. We're streaming on Facebook, 88.1 Fargo Moorhead, YouTube at Duke 1517, and Twitch at A Mexican Crossing Lines.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on A Mexican Crossing Lines. I hope that you will follow us on all of our social media platforms, subscribe, and share our content. You can also reach us at our call-in line and leave us a message with your comments and questions, 701-566-0917. Alrighty, well, here we are once again at 88.1 FM, KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Tonight, you have your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp
and Duke Gomez-Schempp,
talking about the rally that happened this weekend and the continuation of what the former president, Trump, has been doing with his speeches, which is to incite violence, to continue the coup that took place on January 6, 2016. And we are getting more and more details of what exactly happened and who was involved. I told you I have been following the cases of the January 6 insurrectionists in Washington, D.C. I've also been following all of the cases of purported election fraud. I say purported because the lawyers for the former president, on the one hand, would go on media like Fox News and Newsmax and OAN and others like them to say that there had been fraud, that the election was corrupted, that there was some kind of wrongdoing. However, in the 60-plus court cases that were brought, they did not allege fraud. They did not have any proof of any wrongdoing. They did not show any cause to any court why they should be heard, why their cases even should be entertained, because the shoddy work, the Mickey Mouse work of their lawyers wasn't even up to snuff. And now, as all of this is unraveling, we are learning more about the plan that was behind the coup. So tonight's show is titled Coup plus Plan.
Oh, yeah.
Not Ku Klux Klan. Don't get it twisted. Although a lot of people are saying that the rally that took place this weekend by the former president was very similar to a Nazi rally.
Really?
Yeah, because of the kinds of things that were being said, not the least of which was an accusation of the mostly black prosecutors, both in New York and now in Georgia, that are looking into the illegalities having to do with the pressure campaign behind the big lie to overturn the election results in Georgia and fraud charges against the Trump World Organization in New York. So, I don't know if that's an indicator of some people feeling the noose tightening around their neck.
I think so.
But it's definitely a desperate act, in my opinion. We're going to go over some of what we have more recently learned about the coup plus plan, because there was a plan behind it, the coup. And for the people out there that just can't get behind the idea that January 6th was more than just a parade, a riot, a tourist trip, you need to go listen to somebody else, because here on A Mexican Crossing Lines, I am going to bring you the facts straight. I'm going to tell you exactly what this is, and according to the law, what can be done about it. So, I wanted to track back to January 6th, all the way back to the day of the insurrection.
Okay.
Because there have been so many things that we have learned as a result of the videotapes, the interviews, the behind the scenes workings of what occurred that day. But nothing has been more profound than Mike Pence's intervention or lack thereof to certify the electors. Now, Duke, you'll remember that there was an argument by the former president and his lawyers, including John Eastman, who's now being investigated, Jenna Ellis, and many others, that authored a memo saying that it was perfectly legal for Trump to tell Pence not to certify the electors. That it was perfectly legal to tell Pence that he could, that he had a power not recognized anywhere in the Constitution or elsewhere to certify a separate set of electors or not to certify the electors at all.
Yeah, and the people in the community just are being fooled. You know, it's propaganda. And, you know, they're relying on people not knowing anything about the law, not knowing anything about the Constitution. It's easy to look up for what the process is. None of that stuff is in there. And so they're out there planting these ideas, and people just pick up on it. Oh, yeah, they had it ready because it was fraudulent, so of course he could do that. And none of it's true, but they keep on saying it.
Well, you know, what we've been learning is that they started a fire and then they called the firefighters in to put out the flames of the fire they started. And we don't allow that in American law and American democracy. You can't create the, the criminal action that you are then there to fix.
Yep.
So all of the claims of election fraud, it's rigged, it's because they were rigging.
Yep,
it's because
exactly.
they were plotting.
Yeah, they're continuing to rig.
And they continue to do just that. One of the people that was at the January 6th insurrection, that was there during the insurrection, was a local radio personality station,
Yeah.
Scott Hennon. It's a conservative station. And I want you to know, before I play this clip of an interview that Scott Hennon gave to a local television program called 630 Point of View with Chris Berg, on January 6th, while he was holed up at the Capitol, that he is an ardent Trump supporter. He's hosted Mike Lindell at his radio station. In fact, Chris Berg is no longer employed with the TV station he was employed with and is now working with Chris Hennon. Scott Hennon, excuse me. Chris Hennon is his brother. That's a different Hennon.
Yep.
Different story.
Yep.
But Scott Hennon and his radio station are very much rah, sis, boom, bah, 100% Trump supporters. And Scott Hennon condemned the mob of people at the Capitol that day and was very certain, as many Republicans were espousing that they thought they were, that the people that were at the Capitol that caused the damage, that did the violence, were not Trump supporters. Had to be Antifa, had to be Black Lives Matter, even though not a shred of evidence that Black Lives Matter, that Antifa figured in any significant way or at all has been produced since January 6th of 2020. Nothing has shown that Black Lives Matter or Antifa were there, present, leading, or doing anything having to do with the violence that occurred at the Capitol. Another thing that has been discussed very widely was what happened with Mike Pence, because Mike Pence had the Secret Service take him out of the Capitol, right? He wanted to stay and complete his job. He did not want to leave until the electors were certified, but they whisked him away, and the Secret Service tried to put him in a car and take him to a different location, and he refused. Do you remember that?
Yep, sure do.
It was pretty shocking news because he refused to leave the Capitol grounds, and we later found out that part of the plan, which Pence was completely in the know of, he knew all of the parts of this coup, as did many GOP lawmakers and Congress members at the state and federal levels. They knew the whole plan. There was even a PowerPoint, right? They didn't want Pence to be at the Capitol. Part of the plan was that Pence would not be able to certify the electors, that chaos would reign within the Capitol, and somehow a separate set of electors, a fake set of electors, that had fraudulent documents that they had forged in their states, in these battleground states, would somehow appear, and Pence would have to go, or somebody like Grassley would have to go, well, this is in dispute, so I guess we don't certify who the president is today. Something along those lines. And Scott Hennon, who was there, told us what he witnessed, what he heard, and part of it was that Mike Pence was the one that called the National Guard, and that Trump was AWOL. Nobody could get a hold of him, or they weren't able to speak to him to tell him to stop the people that were at the Capitol. They also discussed the 25th Amendment and Trump not being, of sound mind and body to lead the country. And Scott Hennon asserts that Pence was the one that was the point man, he calls him, that took over essentially as commander-in-chief. And he says that because Pence was the one that was calling in the National Guard, because the Department of Defense called from the White House and said, we need your authorization to send the National Guard. Do we have your authorization? And he said yes. So Hennon says the palace intrigue was that Pence was the acting commander-in-chief at the time. Now, I don't know if the January 6th committee has had a chance to talk to people who were there, in holed up in Kevin Cramer's office, Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota. You'll see in the background, they have a UND jersey hanging on the wall that has Kevin Cramer's last name. So we know whose office he's holed up in. And I want you to listen very carefully to the back and forth about Mike Pence being in charge as the commander-in-chief, as it was rumored on January 6th. Take a listen.
All right, let's bring in our good friend Scott Hennon live from Washington, D.C. I believe he's with us via Skype. He's been there throughout the day. Scott, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. I'm assuming it's been just absolutely nuts. Share with our audience what about your day has been maybe the most shocking thing or most interesting thing that you think our audience should know?
Well, I think it would be what everybody saw, and that was people breaking into the Capitol and storming the House floor, and people in what looked like SWAT gear that, by the way, didn't have any Trump attire on, but in fact, Chris, had black helmets, and most of the egregious stuff I've seen, it wasn't the Trump people. There are some Trump flags and whatnot. I wouldn't doubt decoys. I don't know. Anybody in this building illegally should go to jail. If they planned this, if they perpetrated this, they ought to be in jail for life. And we'll know that before too long. Okay, Chris, we'll know that. I don't know if it'll be a week from now, 2 weeks from now. We'll know who they are.
Now, I want to stop here just for a second because over 700 people have been prosecuted so far. More people are expected to be prosecuted. Around 1,000 people were said to have entered the Capitol illegally, although many thousands more were on the Capitol steps, around the Capitol, chanting, cheering on the people that breached the Capitol and that participated in assaults on the police that broke through the barricades, because no one was supposed to be on the grounds of the Capitol. Those people too were trespassing. Those people too could be charged. More charges are coming for people that weren't even there that day. Okay? Because remember, Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, he wasn't there at the Capitol. But he's being charged with seditious conspiracy, one of the toughest charges. Many others will be coming down the road. And what this conservative Trump-supporting radio show host said is that every single person that committed violence, that entered the Capitol, that perpetrated what he witnessed there that day, should be in prison for life. And I completely agree with him. I think that the punishment should match the crime. And trying to overthrow your government, betraying your loyalty to your country, to this Constitution, and to this government is the worst crime you can commit, and therefore should be harshly punished. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the people that entered the Capitol and participated in that mob are getting slaps on the wrist. They're getting probation. They're getting home detention. Several years of it, but nonetheless, a slap on the wrist. Very few of them, those who have committed the most heinous acts of violence against police, are getting some jail time. Many of the people that committed heinous acts of violence against police are getting only detention, home detention, and probation. So, just to keep in context, because this was a year ago when Scott Hennon was saying this, many Republicans today have changed their tune completely and are saying that we should have mercy for these people. They're not being treated fairly. They really didn't even do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So I just want to give that contrast for how people felt about it, even Republican, staunch Trump supporters, on the day that it happened, because they were there and they were horrified by what they saw. Continue.
Who they're with, whether it's Antifa, but I know this. I've been here for 2 days. 99% of the people here aren't part of what happened tonight at the U.S. Capitol. 99% had no part in that, okay? 1% did. And the 1% may be people who voted for Donald Trump and are just mad as hell right now. I can't blame them for being mad as hell. I can blame them for creating a mob scene here. But the beauty of America is on the House and Senate floor, there was a mob, legitimately a mob, okay, of people, I don't know how long, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, I forget how long I've been talking. By the way, I'm holed up in one of the Senate office buildings of three. In the Hart Senate office building moments ago, I saw every U.S. senator, including our own, walk in. Josh Hawley had 4 guards around him, but really every member had about 2 for every member, and they're back in the cloakroom. Mike Pence is in this building. So within hours of a mob, with shots fired, with 5 people going to, a hospital for injuries, with countless more Capitol Police hurt, they're going to resume debate, Chris. I heard what you said about the president of the Defense Department. Kevin McCarthy's addressed this already. And by the way, friends of ours, they want the family of President Trump to intervene because they believe he's not of sound mind. I don't think that's the case. I really don't. I don't know. What do I know? I'm some schmucko from North Dakota holed up in an office in the Capitol until somebody tells me to leave. Okay? With authorization, I would say, with the person that holds this office, and I hope you can't even know who that is, because I don't want anybody to know where I'm at. Crazy people watch Point of View. I'm kidding. Great people watch Point of View. The problem is we can't have a mob of our side or their side. What I heard Kevin McCarthy say, we're going to go back to the Senate floor, and let's not have a mob anymore. Let's not have a mob anymore of us versus them. Let's stop saying what we say to each other on Twitter and Facebook. Let's be Americans. Let's debate right here. If that's what we're supposed to do, let's not have a mob here.
So let me ask
I
you
think
this.
peace is going to take over pretty quick, Chris. I really do.
Wow, we've been saying that now for a few years, and it hasn't taken over yet. So let me ask you this.
I wanted to finish, if I can, quickly on Kevin McCarthy, because I understand they tried to get the president, okay? They tried to find the president, and I don't know where he was at that very moment, but Mike Pence was kind of the point guy. Obviously, he was here on the ground. And so Mike Pence immediately is talking to DOD. He's saying, get the National Guard troops from D.C. here. The Defense Department called back and did the formal stuff, tried to find the president, couldn't get him on the line at that second. Pence was already in the line, so Pence said yes.
Scott,
so the palace intrigue is that Pence is now in charge. I don't know whether he is or not, but I think that's a little...
Okay, there we have it, right? He said they called, the Department of Defense called, and they said, we need your authorization. They tried to get it from Trump, but he wasn't available, and Pence was there, so he gave it. And then he says, so now the palace intrigue is Pence is in charge.
Yep.
Well, he was. He was the one that had to authorize for the National Guard to come, according to Scott Hennon and what he heard. And the president, former President Donald Trump, was not there. He was AWOL. Okay? This is a shocker.
A little bit of D.C. swampish talk, and we'll see if it actually is true. We'll find that out, too.
We will. I guess my question to you is, do you really believe Kevin McCarthy, they can't get a hold of the President of the United States?
Well, if we're talking in the span of a minute, I don't know, did he go to the bathroom? I mean, again, this isn't like they were waiting for him to get back in hours. They had to make decisions in seconds, right?
So why? They didn't get the National Guard green lit for hours when the thing had already been stormed.
No. Mike Pence requested them the minute all this happened, before he'd even left the Capitol. He requested that.
Wait, Mike,
DOD,
wait. Mike Pence requested who?
Okay, well, let me back up. The DOD called because the White House said, ask us for authorization for Guard troops. Okay? At that point, the Secretary of Defense gets on the phone and says, I need authorization.
Pause. What you're telling me is we've got people storming the U.S. Capitol, and it took the Department of Defense to call the White House to say, hey, please give us the green light to do this?
That's how the Constitution works, Chris. I'm sorry.
No,
but that's how it works.
The Commander-in-Chief. The Commander-in-Chief has a phone and a pen. We learned that. And he goes, hey, guess what, National Guard? Guess what? We are going to go because we're not going to have people storming the U.S. Capitol.
Let me ask you this. Do you think Donald Trump wanted the National Guard here?
No.
I do. I do, actually, because the National Guard were needed because we found out what happened when they weren't here. People that shouldn't have been in this Capitol were here. They shouldn't have been here.
So this gets to my point that I was going to ask you a moment ago, and I wanted you to finish on Kevin McCarthy, is the fact that, and look, I know that you love President Trump. I'm asking you to answer this as objectively as you possibly can. President Trump went up there today at 11 this morning, gave his speech, said, hey, let's go to the Capitol. Many people are suggesting that if President Trump wouldn't have done that, they're saying he riled people up, this wouldn't have happened. I wasn't there. I want to get your assessment of what's being reported in regards to President Trump has got, I don't know, some responsibility for this because of his speech.
Okay. I want to pause here because I think they glossed over some flub there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
He said, so the president didn't call and say, we need the National Guard down there at the Capitol immediately. The Department of Defense called the White House to say, hey, people at the Capitol are asking for the National Guard. Can we send the National Guard? Yeah. And Chris Berg says, wait a minute. You're telling me you believe Kevin McCarthy couldn't get a hold of the president? You're telling me that instead of the president picking up his phone and calling and saying, we can't have people storming the Capitol, get the National Guard down there ASAP, that the Department of Defense was calling over and going, hey, can we send people down there? And then Scott Hennon asks him a question, says, well, wait a minute, because this is what it comes down to. Was the president okay with the storming of the Capitol? Because he didn't want the National Guard to stop it, right? And he asks Chris, do you really think that the president, Donald Trump, did not want National Guard? And he says, yeah, I don't think he wanted the National Guard. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think he wanted the National Guard. Do you think that he wanted the National Guard down there? He says, no. And he goes, I think he did want the National Guard down there. Yeah. Unfortunately, though, Scott and Chris, if he wanted the National Guard, he did a piss poor job of showing that because he never asked for them.
Exactly.
He conveniently hid from phone calls. He was there. He was watching the whole thing. We now know that he was watching it. We now know that Ivanka came in to try to get him to do something, to say something. We know that he made multiple videos where he didn't ask the crowd to leave. Why? Because he was enjoying the coup. He was enjoying it. And I know that it's hard for these two conservative radio show hosts to accept that. But in fact, that is what happened. So then Chris flips it and goes, hey, I want you to answer me this. What do you think about the president taking action? So let's listen to what they had to say.
Speech earlier today.
I would say he does. And when I say that, he certainly is to thank for the 99% of American patriots that came here, did nothing wrong, other than exercising free speech, which isn't welcome in the United States Capitol, okay? So the 99% were whipped up by Donald J. Trump. They're absolutely right. I believe 1% of them either made a bad decision or they weren't Donald Trump supporters from the beginning. Yeah. And if we, I had one member of the Senate tell me, find whoever was the first person to breach the Capitol Police, bring the body, if they've been shot, to the floor of the Senate. Let's see if there's an Antifa tattoo. So my point is, we've known for weeks there were plans to do this, and I'm going to ask you to back up and say, if you were going to do something, the worst possible thing to make Donald Trump look bad, you do what happened today here.
Absolutely.
Whether you love the man or you don't, this was awful, and every single person that did it needs to go to jail. No question about it.
I agree completely, Scott. But I don't know if the Scott of today would agree with himself. Do you? Because I don't. All of these Trumpers and all of these supporters if you are a Trump supporter today, you are supporting the desecration of the Capitol, the killing of police officers at the Capitol, riot, insurrection, coup. You are also against our democracy, against our Constitution, and against the rule of law. And I'm an American. I can't coup with you. I can't Ku Klux Klan. Ku Plus Plan with you.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of people that could.
Yeah, there are a couple of cuckoos, I tell you that. They would never. They probably look back and say, "Well, that was on January 6th, and I was really upset then." Talking about a senator who said the first person to dragged their body after their shot to the Senate floor.
That's Ashley Babbitt.
Babbitt said that, and we'll see if there's an Antifa tattoo on her.
Turns out she wasn't Antifa. She was a U.S. military veteran that was very much connected to Trump supporting and the MAGA movement and QAnon. And also Trump went ahead and did a birthday video for her and turned her into a martyr. They're no longer distancing themselves from these people. And also, I just want to say, they're trying to paint this picture. People on the right were trying to paint this picture from the moment the insurrection happened to distance themselves from the ugly, from the crime, from the evil. And I get it. Well, you wouldn't want to be associated. I can understand why, on the face of it, you wouldn't want to be in any way associated to this kind of treason and criming and evil. So I can understand why you would say, oh, yeah, let's get that body of that Ashley Babbitt person after they shoot her and bring her down, and let's strip her down and find that Antifa tattoo because she can't possibly be a real Trump supporter. Well, now that's morphed into all the Trump supporters need to be protected and need to be pardoned for what they did a year ago or for what they might do in the future. I'm not really sure. But let me just break down for you what I think is really, really going on. Because Trump, in his latest speech, he is telegraphing what he needs for himself, what's going on with him. Because, I'm just going to be really honest. I don't think he's really campaigning. I don't think that he has even the support from the base of Republicans anymore. His support has been waning very, very steadily, but it has significantly dropped. You could see all throughout the last 6 months where he has had events or rallies or speeches, whether it be the Bill O'Reilly tour that he did or what have you. The numbers of people have been dwindling.
Yep.
It's been, and the support from people in the Republican Party, people that were campaigning for him, part of the insurrection, people over at InfoWars like Alex Jones, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, all sorts of people that were very, very staunchly behind the president have been criticizing him and calling him an enemy, an evil, a liar, all sorts of things. Also, a lot of the people, and I'm talking about literally thousands of people that got caught up in this mess, that have been looking over their shoulder since January 6th, and you should, because they're still coming for you, because they participated in this Coup Plus plan. Those people are getting smart now. They're starting to figure out they were had. Some of them are actually speaking out and saying, Trump was a liar that ensnared us and then left us out to dry. We're gonna pay the piper for what he said and what he did, and it's unfair. So a lot of the people are turning on Trump. I've been showing you how many people have been turning on Trump within his own party, within the MAGA movement, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that Trump is the most disloyal person you will ever know. He only has people in his corner to do his bidding, and as long as you're useful to him, he's there. He's with you. But the moment you are no longer useful, the moment you do not do his bidding, the moment that you do not say how high in response to his saying jump, that is the moment where you are no longer necessary. You're expendable. You go under the bus, right?
Yep.
So, I don't really believe that all of the work that he is doing right now is aimed at a campaign, any real campaign to put him back into the presidency. I don't think he has the support, the finances, the anything to pull that off. You could disagree with me, but I will tell you what I think the meaning behind these speeches is. I think the meaning is him projecting out whatever support he can get, especially from his most loyal, ride or die supporters, in terms of creating more chaos, creating a scorched earth environment where even though the likelihood of what he is proposing in this speech I'm about to play for you, the likelihood of this happening and having any beneficial effect to stop the investigations of Trump, his family, his organization, his children, or his co-conspirators, even though the possibility of what he's asking for, helping him stop those investigations, is near zero, absolutely will not help him whatsoever. That doesn't stop him from trying to incite another riot. It doesn't stop him from trying to incite more violence and more rioting and more chaos, because it's the only thing he has left, really. It's his only way of getting some form of revenge or feeling that he still has the ability to use the power of his voice to wind up his minions to go and do his bidding. He still can call on his followers to riot and to do harm to others. And there are people out there who see Trump the way that they view the Savior on the cross.
Yep.
And they will do his bidding. That's just how much he means to them. So I want you to listen to this clip from his Texas rally this weekend and listen to how he is attacking the mostly black prosecutions against him across this country. Here you go.
But that's really what they want. It really is prosecutorial misconduct at the highest level. These prosecutors are vicious, horrible people. They're racists, and they're very sick. They're mentally sick. They're going after me without any protection of my rights by the Supreme Court or most other courts. In reality, they're not after me. They're after you. And I just happen to be the person that's in the way. That's what they're after. It's been going on for years.
Wow.
They're after you. They're not after me. Oh, actually, they're after you. The prosecution of the Trump World Organization is going after Trump and his kids. And they already have his CFO, Weisselberg, in jail. He's already in jail. Now, this is important for you to take into account because he's trying to put himself in the same basket with his supporters. We're in this together. What happens to me is happening to you. What happens to you is happening to me, right? And this is what he said after that part of the speech. He went on to say in the call to action, right? He said, if these radical, vicious, racist prosecutors do anything wrong or illegal, I hope we are going to have in this country the biggest protests we have ever had in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Atlanta. Because our country and our elections are corrupt. Now, we know that this is a lie because his own Republican head of national security for elections said that these have been the most secure elections in our nation's history. The Republican state secretaries for Georgia and for other states that were battleground states also told him that their elections were not fraudulent, they were not corrupt, that there were no irregularities, and that there was no way for them to be able to find more votes or overturn the results of the election or not certify the electors for those states. But he persisted. He went so far as to have Lindsey Graham call. Remember? Lindsey Graham got involved. I suppose Lindsey Graham is probably not too happy about the ongoing investigations into what happened in Georgia either, or Arizona, or Pennsylvania, or Missouri. Michigan, excuse me.
Yep.
Michigan. But let me tell you that his words do have consequences and reactions. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and one has taken place in the Georgia prosecutor's office, which in the aftermath of that speech that you just heard, where he is asking people to go out and protest against anybody that does him wrong, anybody that hurts Trump or his family, with these vicious prosecutions, he calls them, racist prosecutions. Why? Because they're black people that are investigating a white man? That's racist?
Exactly,
Is that
yeah.
what is going on? I don't understand. But anyway, the Georgia prosecutor's office had to request that the FBI provide security for their prosecuting team.
Wow.
So on Saturday, he railed against prosecutors like the Fulton County DA, Fannie Willis, who is investigating him, calling the black people racists and urging mass protests from his followers. And this was the statement from the Georgia prosecutor. This is what the statement was from the Georgia prosecutor, saying the following. Fannie asked that the federal law enforcement agency conduct a risk assessment of the Fulton County Courthouse and Government Center, and that they provide protective resources to include intelligence and federal agents, saying, "We must work together to keep the public safe and ensure that we do not have a tragedy in Atlanta similar to what happened at the United States Capitol on January 6th. My staff and I will not be influenced or intimidated by anyone as this investigation moves forward." Now, why would Fannie, why would any of these people prosecuting Trump fear violence because he told people to protest? Well, because in the past, following the election in 2020, he started naming the names of election workers in Georgia, election workers who are currently suing Trump and other people in his administration for repeating their names, defaming them, and sending hordes of violent Trump supporters to their homes. So we know that when Trump dog whistles to his base, they listen. And then there is the co-conspirators. When Scott Hennon was talking in that video where he said, "Do you know what I know in my heart of hearts? I know that it was just that 1%. The 99% were good. But that 1%, there was a 1%, I don't know if they were Trump supporters or not, but that 1% was the bad apple."
Yep.
No. Let me tell you, what we are learning because of the investigation by the January 6th Select Committee is that it wasn't a 1%. It was a large number of the GOP at the state level, at the federal level. In fact, it was such a large number of people that were in the know. They were aware that the coup was going to be coming, that they were aware that there were going to be violent protests, that they were aware that there was a plan for secret electors, that they were aware that there was a number of people that were working on forging documents, working on breaking into the Capitol on the day that they were going to certify the electors or ascertain them. And what we're learning about all of these things from the Select Committee shows us that there was a vast conspiracy that involved hundreds and hundreds of people. Just the fake electors alone is 85 people, Duke.
Wow.
That's just the fake electors involved that signed their names to fraudulent documents that were turned into the National Security Council. Or, sorry, the, what's it called?
Archives?
The Archives,
Yeah.
National Archives. So I wanted to share this thread from Eric Garland. You can find him on Twitter at Eric Garland, where he talks about how this conspiracy involves a lot of people at the state level. And it's much bigger than we know, much bigger than we've heard of, much bigger than we've been led to think of it, especially by the GOP, that wants you to think it was just that bad apple, that 1%. Nothing to see here.
Yep.
Don't worry about the whole party of Republicans being corrupted. And this is what he said. He starts with Ed Martin, who's a former head of the Missouri GOP and also the head of the St. Louis group that supported foreign agent Mike Flynn. Remember, Mike Flynn is a convicted felon that was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee over his direct organization and financing of the attempted coup d'etat on January 6th. And then it shows a portion of the letter that was sent to him, Ed Martin, on December 9 of 2020, just last month. And this is like a 3-page letter that I looked at the whole thing. I'm going to be showing you parts of it, or Eric is in these following tweets on this thread, but I want you to pay attention to his great summary, because you can go ahead and read this whole thing for yourselves, but the summary that he does is just so good. This next tweet shows you that Ed Martin was one of the organizers with the Stop the Steal movement, Stop the Steal rallies. And it says here, as part of the letter that was sent to Ed Martin, is shown in the tweet, but he says, former Missouri GOP chairman and head of the Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum, Ed Martin, was an organizer of a series of rallies leading up to the full violent attempted overthrow of the U.S. government. So he wasn't just involved on January 6th. He was involved in a lot of planning and rallies that led up to January 6th. And in this next one, it talks about the fact that he took out a permit along with Ali Abdul Akbar, Ali Abdul Razak Akbar, a.k.a. Ali Alexander, former head of the GOP, Missouri GOP. Mr. Martin was working with Ali Alexander to obtain a permit for a protest on the Capitol grounds just a short distance from the Trump rally, and claimed only 50 people would be in attendance there. And Eric calls this a bait and switch treason. Now, you will also recall that there is a lot of back and forth about, rally organizers saying that they were very upset at Ali Alexander. They were very upset with, the Roger Stone, the Alex Jones, Ali Alexander contingent that were holding another rally, a separate rally, a rally that was supposed to be violent, that everyone knew was going to be violent. And that's the important part. You see, everyone knew it was going to be violent. And that's also in the letter that was sent to Mr. Martin. Here is that portion of the letter in which it says that the events were expected by the planners to be violent, to be about the election, or how it was quote unquote rigged, according to then President Trump. And this was discussed openly between the White House, members of Congress, and the planners, or as he calls them, these traitors. So all of this was known. Wow. There was no mystery to it. The people that were telling you, like Scott Hennon a year ago, we're going to know in the upcoming weeks. It's a year later, folks.
Yep.
It is a year later. And we are now beginning to learn the depths that this went into. So, in this next part of the summary, or close to the end of the summary here, he says that Ed Martin, the St. Louis GOP head, worked with Alex Jones operatives. Again, that's Ali Alexander, Roger Stone, InfoWars, Alex Jones, Proud Boy reporter Joe Biggs. Oh, yeah. All of those people are with InfoWars, okay? And he says that the GOP from St. Louis worked with Alex Jones's operatives on a series of violent events aimed at eventually murdering Congress and establishing martial law. Wow. And that's part of the letter where they talk about how at this event, at this rally, they led a chant of victory or death. They were calling for people to martyr themselves. They were calling for violent acts that could lead to the death of members of Congress or themselves. Wow. At these rallies, openly. And this is what we didn't know about Ed Martin, that he adds as additional information, just factoids about Ed Martin, this person that is being investigated by the January 6th Select Committee regarding the coup against our democracy. Ed Martin used to be the chief of staff for Missouri Governor Matt Blunt. And Matt Blunt left the governorship so he could work with the group Ashcroft Group, which eventually was revealed to be a foreign agent for the countries of Qatar and Malaysia.
Oh, my God.
Remember, Rudy Giuliani, the former president's lawyer, also investigated as a foreign agent. Lev Parnas, one of the people that was indicted, he's under federal indictment, also foreign agent. How many? Jared Kushner was also being investigated for something related to that, I believe. We got a lot of people with interests in other countries. Matt Blunt is the brother of a guy named Andy Blunt, who is also a registered FARA agent for Qatar, Nigeria, and China. And Matt and Andy's daddy is Senator Roy Blunt, who had the highest office of oversight over the Capitol Police on January 6, 2021.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at what really could be going on in terms of why Trump was giving this speech. Because after his rally, he put out this jaw-dropping statement. This is a statement put out on January 30th, just yesterday, by former President Donald Trump. He says, if the Vice President, Mike Pence, had, quote unquote, absolutely no right to change the presidential election results in the Senate, despite fraud and many other irregularities, how come the Democrats and rhino Republicans like wacky Susan Collins are desperately trying to pass legislation that will not allow the vice president to change the results of the election? Actually, what they are saying is that Mike Pence did have the right to change the outcome, and they now want to take that away. They now want to take that right away. Unfortunately, he didn't exercise that power. He could have overturned the election.
Liar. Propaganda. Not true.
Well, what do you think about the first part? Because he said that this, if he didn't have the right to do it, then Democrats and Republicans wouldn't be trying to pass legislation to put some rules into place that would prevent this kind of loopholing or illegal activity.
I don't think there's a loophole there. He's not even really talking about. We don't even know exactly what they're doing, and have to look it up. Have to look at. I know that you read the Constitution. There's 2-hour debates between the House and the Senate, and they have to come back together and do some sort of vote. But that's counting on that everybody's going to vote against the actual electors. I don't know what they're going to try to shore up, but it does just make it that if they're trying to tweak something or to change something, doesn't mean that it already existed, that it was that way, that it was okay for him to do this in the first place. Otherwise, they wouldn't be changing it. That sounds like a child's argument for trying to make sense of something.
It literally is a child's argument. And let me tell you why, okay? I know that I talk a lot about the law, and what I try to do is to demystify it, to make it easy for people to understand, because the law is very complicated and lay people have a hard time understanding it. There's a lot of layers because there's different kinds of law. There's administrative law, there's criminal law, there's civil law, right? There's there's martial law, there's maritime law, there's all sorts of different kinds of entities and jurisdictions and laws, and some supersede other laws, and it's very hard for people to understand how they interconnect and how they work. But let me just take it back down to the basics. What is the most important thing that I have taught you about the law? How the law operates. It's based on...
Well, it's based on whether it can be enforced. If it can't be enforced, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay. A law is not really existent, I guess, unless it's being enforced.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's one of the important things I taught you about the law. But I'm just talking about what laws we consider, what we even consider as that's a rule that we have to follow. Why do we follow those rules? It has to do with the word precedent.
Oh, okay.
And do you remember what I told you about precedent?
Yeah, it has to be proven before, and codified in the courts for it to actually have any effect when you bring something in totally new and it hasn't been dealt with before. You have a really low chance that you'll actually prove something,
Exactly. So the way that I explained the law to other people and the way that I learned about it is that we went back to the beginning of when we created laws, and we looked at what did we do when this happened before. So let's say all the way back where our laws come from, which is from England, right? When they would go before a king and say, hey, that's why they call it a court, because people would go into the king's court,
Yeah.
right? The king would hold court and people come in and make complaints. And somebody came in and said, neighbor's cow came in my field and mucked things up. Then the king, the court, would ask, what did we do as punishment for the last guy that came in who had a cow that ran amok? What did we do? Okay, whatever that guy got, this is what this guy is going to get.
Yep.
So that's the basis of precedent. When have you ever heard in the entire history of America that the vice president decided, you know what? We're not going to just do the procedural thing of counting the electors and certifying them. We're going to do something different.
Yeah.
Never.
Never.
Because there's no precedent for it. That's how you know that it is a childish argument.
Gotcha.
It didn't exist. And everything in the law is based on precedent. Let me tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. He did not have the power to overturn the election. Pence never had that power. Trump is arguing now, and in a way, people were like pooping their pants over the weekend because he put out this statement and they were like, oh my God, Merrick Garland, are you paying attention? He just admitted it. He just said that he was trying to, that his pressure campaign to try to get Pence not to certify the electors, that he was trying to overturn the election. Why? Why, when the world is closing in on him, would Trump make this admission in writing?
Yep.
Right? Well, Eric Garland, once again, has this very salient thought about what's really going on. And he says that Trump is only admitting, quote unquote, he's only admitting this plan now that the fake electors and the forged documents have come to light, are being revealed. Trump's quote unquote admission is the last stronghold for Republicans because it limits the culpability for all this nonsense to one person, Trump. When in fact, we are learning that state GOP leaders were involved in the conspiracy. That fake electors, to the tune of about 85 of them, were involved in the conspiracy. That members of Congress, many of them, were aware of the conspiracy of the coup and in some capacity. It wasn't the 1%. It was a whole lot of percents. A whole lot of them. And it's all starting to come out. They would like to limit the splatter from what we are learning and what's going to happen to the people that were involved in this conspiracy. Because they don't want it to affect all those state GOP leaders. Because they don't want it to affect all of those races, all of those fundraisers, all of those people. But let me tell you, the room is going to get heavier and there's going to be more paranoia and more people flying under buses than you can shake a stick at. Mm-hmm. This is one of the people, and he is feeling the heat. This is Scott Perry from the state of Pennsylvania, who has now been forced to admit that he talked with Trump about overturning the Georgia election results. And we know that Trump and his lawyers, Cleta Mitchell and Rudy Giuliani, and that other lawyer that was working with Jenna Ellis, all of these people, they admitted now, because they've been caught red-handed, they were calling people at the state legislature levels in the state of Georgia and other battleground states and trying to get them to manipulate the election results. And so there's been referrals from different states to the Department of Justice for those folks to be investigated. Can those folks even be eligible to run and to be representatives of government at any level? That's a question that is being asked. That's a question that in places like North Carolina, where Cawthorn is from, people are looking at whether or not this person can even run for Congress or be in Congress anymore. These are questions that are going to get asked, and these are investigations that are going to be happening. So here's another internet lawyer, or here's another YouTube lawyer, Glenn Kirshner, who frequently comments on the investigations around the election results and what's going on with the insurrection and all of that. And this is what he had to say about the speech that Trump gave this weekend, saying that it's very dangerous what Trump said, because Trump is not only encouraging his supporters to violence if he gets arrested, he's also signaling that he will pardon them.
Yeah. Just
as he will pardon the January 6th insurrectionists. And he asks, the Department of Justice, will this finally move prosecutors to hold him accountable for his crimes? I have a question for you, Duke.
Yeah.
Because it's true, Trump did offer some pardons. I want you to play the clip of his speech right now, where he goes out on a limb here and he says, if he wins in 2024, and remember I told you I don't really believe he's going to run, but he not only says he's going to run, but when he wins, he's offering this. Take a listen for yourselves. This sounds like a pardon offer.
If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons, because they are being treated so unfairly.
Well, whatever is happening to them happened at Trump's request. It happened because Trump told them that they weren't doing anything illegal. It happened because Trump and his cronies and his lawyers lied to them and told them that there had been a crime committed against him, against our elections, that he was investigating and that he was prosecuting, and that they would all see the evidence of any moment now. That never happened. Do you really believe he plans on pardoning anyone? Do you think that he could or would pardon any of the people that were involved in January 6th?
I don't think so. I think that's another piece of propaganda that he's just putting out there for. And also, I'm wondering what Scott Hennon thinks now, because he said every single person that had anything to do with this that breached the Capitol should be put in prison for life.
Oh, I think he probably is in the give them all pardons camp now.
Yep, for sure.
Because everybody has changed. But you know what? I think these people are delusional. He could have pardoned you while he was still president.
That's right.
Because on his way out the door, he pardoned hundreds of people.
Some people expected to be pardoned. She was saying, I'm going to get pardoned by Donald Trump because that's the reason I went.
The QAnon shaman's mom told him not to take a plea deal.
Yep.
Because Trump was going to come back into power and pardon him. Trump didn't pardon any of the people that he saw as expendable, which is a lot of his MAGA base, because he didn't care about them then. He still doesn't care about them now. The only reason he is telling them he gives a rip about what happens to them is because he wants them to go out there and commit as much violence and chaos and sow division and hate as part of his revenge for what he feels is unfair targeting by these black prosecutors in different states. And this is what one of his co-conspirators had to say about his speech. Here he is, Lindsey Graham on Face the Nation.
Senator, more than 730 people have been charged by the Justice Department for their role in the attack on the Capitol on January 6th to stop the certification of our election. Last night, President Trump at a rally said this.
If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
Pardons? Do you agree?
Yeah. No, I don't want to send any signal that it was okay to defile the Capitol. There are other groups with causes that may want to go down the violent path if these people get pardoned.
But isn't that a dangerous thing to say?
Harris, well, I think it's inappropriate. I don't want to reinforce that defiling the Capitol was okay. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do anything that would make this more likely in the future. And just let me finish my thought here. When Kamala Harris and her associates and the people that work for her staffers, raised money to bail out the rioters who hit cops in the head and burned down stores, I didn't like that either. So I don't want to do anything from raising bail to pardoning people who take the law in their own hands because it will make more violence more likely. I want to deter people who did on January the 6th, and those who did it, I hope they go to jail and get the book thrown at them because they deserve it.
That was clear. Senator, before I let you...
I'm surprised you didn't bite off his tongue saying that because he's one of those people
Yep, exactly.
that are being investigated in Georgia. But I will say this. Notice how he had to make sure to throw some dirt on Kamala?
Oh, yeah.
He had to throw some dirt on Kamala and say, she was raising money for the bail and the blah, blah, blah. Listen, those protesters were not trying to overthrow the government. They were not trying to help in a coup like you. They were not part of the coup plus plan, Lindsey. But you were. But not only are Republicans condemning the former president's speech this weekend, so is Pat Leahy. Listen as he gives an interview with CNN's Acosta.
Whatever may come next, that's not a campaign promise, though. That's more like a dictator's decree. Yes, America, the coup is still happening. And joining me now is President Pro Tem of the United States Senate and member of the Judiciary Committee, Democrat Patrick Leahy of Vermont. Senator Leahy, does this sound like a threat to you coming from the former president?
It sounds definitely like a threat. I cannot believe I would ever hear this from somebody running for office or in office. I was a prosecutor for 8 years. To think that somebody would run for a high office and say, you can conduct any kind of criminal conduct you want. Don't worry. If you're doing it to support me, I'll give you a pardon when I get there. As a prosecutor, I'd say this has to be somebody's making this up. It couldn't be real. And yet, when you were there on January 6th, as I was, I look out and I see them putting a noose up to hang the vice president if he didn't throw the election out. I see people storming through. I could smell the tear gas. I could see the damaged windows. Beautiful parts of the Capitol have been damaged. And in seeing people say, we're doing this because Donald Trump told us to. This is not a democracy. This is something that you'd see in a third world nation with a two-bit dictator.
Yeah, but a two-bit dictator who is trying to make a comeback, it sounds like. And we did hear from a couple of Republican senators today reacting to Trump's remarks last night. It was not exactly full-throated condemnation. Let's watch.
I think it's inappropriate. I don't want to reinforce that defiling the Capitol was okay. I don't want to do anything that would make this more likely in the future. I want to deter people who did on January the 6th, and those who did it, I hope they go to jail and get the book thrown at them because they deserve it.
I do not think that President Trump should have made that pledge to do pardons. We should let the judicial process proceed.
Now, I know you don't want to necessarily criticize your Republican colleagues there in the Senate, but that was not exactly a profile and courage moment. Senator, do you think that you're going to see anything more from your Republican colleagues when it comes to defending our democracy and condemning this thuggish, dictator-like behavior that we're seeing from Trump at these rallies?
I think you have to have people stand up in both parties. We saw that after Watergate with Richard Nixon, when you'd have people ranging from Barry Goldwater to Mike Mansfield, right to the left, saying, this is wrong. I mean, as I said, I was a prosecutor for 8 years. When somebody commits a crime or incites crime, that's wrong. I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats. It is wrong. And what the president, former president, has done, there is no question he incited a riot in last year, and there's no question they want to keep on encouraging it. Can you imagine he's saying, look, don't worry, you go out and commit whatever crimes you want. If it's helping me get elected, if I get elected, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. I'll give you a pardon. Now, that's something nobody, Republican or Democrat, should accept. I mean, that is third world baloney.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about President
Yes.
Biden's looming Supreme Court pick.
It is
I think a lot
third world baloney.
Whatever-
I agree with
world
Patrick
baloney.
Leahy, very much so. But you know what I think is really going on here is that it is propaganda from Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think he really is planning on having a campaign. I don't think that he believes he could be successful if he did run. And I don't believe that he's really sincerely offering pardons to anyone. I think that this is a desperate cry for help. You know how that Ethan Crumbley kid, you know, he was telling people that he was hearing voices, and he was increasingly becoming more erratic and more, depressed, showing signs that he was going to do something violent and horrible, to the point where his parents were charged with the deaths of the children that he murdered in the shooting spree that took place. Ethan Crumbley was acting increasingly more and more desperate as he continued to be ignored, as the walls kept tightening around him and things became more and more difficult for him. I think the same thing is happening to Trump. In fact, Eric Garland in this tweet talks about how Trump's pardons are really part of a propaganda. He says, there's a reason Trump's propaganda about offering pardons happened just as the plea deals are beginning to advance in cases where he's being investigated. Just as they get to the bogus electors and the forged documents, all of whom are being investigated by the Department of Justice, and those people are going to be called to account, right? Their proffer is what they can offer as evidence or information to get less time. Their proffer will speed the prosecutions of the whole national criminal enterprise. Once those cretins are cooperating with the feds under Section 5K 1.1, substantial assistance to authorities, that's what the section is called,
All right,
to lower their sentences in their cases, then they're going to be giving up every co-conspirator that they can think of. Remember when I said there's going to be a lot of people going under the bus? They have to. According to that, it says They have to cooperate and give substantial assistance in order to qualify for any time off of their sentence.
Wow.
So a lot of people are going to be talking to save themselves. A lot of these people that agreed to be part of this Coup Plus plan, a lot of people that joined the Coup Plus plan, they didn't expect to go to jail.
Yeah.
They didn't think that they were going to be vilified, seen as a traitor, put down in history as the most giant stain since the Civil War. And they certainly didn't think that they were going to be doing any federal prison time. So all of those people are going to be cooperating. Many of those people are going to cooperate to save their own hides. So Trump is offering these pardons. Prosecutions are ramping up because Trump needs to offer pardons to the next round of people that are being prosecuted. This next round of people, it's not the peons that went to the Capitol that got themselves arrested for parading in the halls or smearing feces on the walls. No, these people, according to this tweet, are the very people who were involved at the local level, at the state level in all of these battleground states, and that were part of the Republican Party in those states, the leadership in those states. In other words, the associated domestic terrorists.
Wow.
That's who's being investigated right now. That's who's going to be offering their assistance to prosecutors and throwing people under the bus. And so when Trump stands there and dog whistles about an event that happened a year ago, for which he could have offered pardons then, but chose not to.
Yep.
Which he doesn't intend to offer pardons now is because he can't say, look, I'm going to ask you guys in this speech tonight to go commit more violent acts of riots and crimes. And I can't say that I'll pardon you if you'll go do this for me, but I can say that if I win, I will pardon those people that got involved before.
Yep.
In the thing everyone already knows about. Because it would be literally, inciting people to act immediately to go and be violent. And that would be something that would put him in the crosshairs of getting arrested. But each of these things that he's doing, he's playing with fire. And he's trying to get more people riled up, wound up to go commit crimes with the illusion, with the promise that he can offer some kind of protection. Folks, if you're listening out there and there is a part of you that still believes in Donald Trump, that still wants to hold on to the MAGA movement, that still wants to drain the swamp or lock her up or build the wall or whatever it is that you thought that you joined that MAGA movement for, let me tell you, it is going to bring you nothing but tears, but sadness, and possible jail time. More people are going to go to jail. And if there wasn't any, if there wasn't anything in the show that you heard tonight to convince you that what Trump said in his speech is just propaganda to try to trick more people, more rubes, into committing crimes on his behalf, then listen to the reporting of Seth MacFarlane, who recently has been reporting on all of the insurrectionist cases and tweeted this about more arrests. He said, yes, more U.S. Capitol riot arrests are likely. Not possible, not maybe, but probably. Because the feds are not being subtle. The feds are signaling more arrests. In court filings this week, they used this phrase, the feds did. The phrase being, defendant is one of hundreds, if not thousands of individuals who entered the Capitol unlawfully that day. Meaning that they know there are hundreds, if not thousands more people that need to be prosecuted. This is the largest prosecution federal prosecution, criminal investigation by the Department of Justice since the creation of the Department of Justice after the Civil War, and it is going to be ongoing for many years to come. This is the Watergate of our generation, and it is beyond anything that we saw at Watergate. So, if you want to follow what's going on with the upcoming insurrection investigation, please keep your radio tuned to 88.1 FM, KPPP LP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. This has been Cindy Gomez-Schempp
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
for Mexican Crossing Lines. Thank you for being with us here this evening. Good night, and God bless.